You're listening to the DC Comics Chronicles, where we cover every adventure from the streets of Gotham to the skies of Metropolis and into the depths of Atlantis. With your hosts, Adam and the Emerald Enthusiast.
Welcome to another episode of the DC Comics Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Adam, a.k.a. the Bruce Wayne of the network, without the money. And with me is my co-host, the Emerald Enthusiast himself, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Batman fans? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy, the podcasting machine, the big nerd in green. It's the Emerald Enthusiast, and it's the podcast with vengeance and darkness, but also with a cute little kitty. It's the DC Comics Chronicles doing Batman.
Right. And there's also a bit of hope, but that's at the end. Anyway.
Right.
But
St. Walker would be proud.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I was actually, I'll confess, I wasn't thinking of St. Walker in that moment, but now, after the fact, it makes sense. But yeah, we're going to review the Batman, which is just coming out as of this recording this weekend. It's the opening weekend. I'll be brutally honest. I wasn't expecting to sit down and do this review for approximately another 45 days or so. Because up until very recently, I wasn't certain that we were going to, I was going to see it in theaters. Just because as much as things are getting slightly better in the real world, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. So that was cause for my trepidation. And Donnie, I know that you weren't planning to see it until it hit HBO Max.
Right.
But both of us had sort of situations that happened that allowed for us to be sitting here doing this review. So how come you decided to venture out into the crazy world that we live in and see this movie?
Well, things kind of turned my way. Fortune smiled on me, and there's a drive-in theater about an hour from me, and I found out that it was opening early to show the Batman. And when I heard that, I asked my youngest kiddo, I said, hey, you want to go see the Batman? They were all for it. So I said, hey, let's go do it.
Awesome. For me, I think I've said this story before on several podcasts, but my first movie experience that I can vividly remember going to a theater was Batman '89. And obviously, because I was only 6 at the time, my mother took me to see the movie. And since then, we've seen every superhero movie together. Obviously, from 6 to a certain age, it was because she was the one taking me and paying for these things. Mm-hmm. So that, out of necessity is not the right word, but out of it just had to be because I was 6.
Right.
And up through 10 and 12, and basically until I got a license and good stuff like that. But once I was old enough to choose which movies I want to see on my own, we kind of sort of continued the tradition that every superhero movie we'd watch together is kind of like in honor of that first one all those years ago.
I like it.
That's kind of been our tradition. And but let me make sure this door is closed. Wait 1 second, because there's a little bit of light coming in and it's bugging me.
Okay. While you're waiting, you can catch the Emerald Echo podcast as well as other episodes of the DC Comics Chronicles right here on YouTube. We put things up just about every weekend, so like, subscribe, and also tell a friend.
Yeah, we got lots of content, but back to my story.
Go ahead.
It's story time.
I was just covering for you. Yeah.
Story time with not Adam Cole, baby. Anyway, that's the wrestling podcast. But anyway, I'm going to sue AEW because they have a lot of Adams there. But that's, I digress. Anyway, back to the Batman. So, I was planning to wait until streaming because pandemic. But I think it was at some point late last week, basically the week before the release. My mom said to me, she saw a TV spot for the Batman, And she's like, don't you want to go see that? Are we going to go see that? And I said, I was thinking we could wait till, and she goes, no. She's like, let's just go. She's like, we're triple vaxxed. We'll wear the mask,
mm-hmm.
and we'll go to an early showing if we can get one, so there'll be less people. And so I looked around. Fortunately, cases are down at the moment, so that's a positive there. The cases are slowing and decreasing, so that was a benefit. But then I was able to find an 11 o'clock showing, 11 a.m. And so I said, all right, let's do it. And so we decided to do it. So that's why that happened. So this is why this episode is being recorded today and not 45 days from now or thereabouts. But yeah, it was good to be able to do that. It was kind of nice to be back in the theater. But look, I've made the decision that until things are in a much better spot, which hopefully will be one day. But as of right now, for the foreseeable future, provided cases stay relatively, solid as they are now, maybe hopefully, God willing, decrease even more.
Yes.
But provided things stay relatively the same way that they are now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and at least see every DC film live action, because I'm not going to the theater for League of Super Pets. No offense to that movie, it's just not for me. It's not for me. I hope lots of kids see it, and I hope that's their entryway to DC. Yeah. But it's just like, I'll watch it when it streams, but I'm not going to go to the theater for that. Yeah. But my strategy is I'm going to try for the live action DC films to head out to a theater, and then for the Marvel films, because they stick everything on Disney Plus, and we have that over here. I'm just going to wait because I like Marvel. But in terms of comic book, franchises, DC's where my heart is. I've often used the illusion, and this is no disrespect, but the Marvel movies are a nice distraction. They're like a one-night stand. I have my fun with them, and then like I'm not emotionally invested.
Right.
Like if they're good, great. If they suck, I just move on. Like you know what I mean. So if the experience isn't good, yeah, I watched you once, I'm out. And I'm gonna get so much hate mail for this. But no, I've used that analogy for years. Don't start hating me now. Anyway, well, hate me for other reasons. Anyway, but no. So, but Marvel gives me the luxury of putting it on Disney Plus, and Disney Plus is available in Canada. So, that's my sort of thought process on that. And look, the Sony ones, I'll wait till they hit streaming. Like if I was able to wait for Venom and Ghostbusters, I can wait for Morbius. You know what I mean? So
I'm really excited about Morbius, but we'll have to see. I
am too, but you know what I mean? It's like, well, again, if the cases are still good and low in a month's time, maybe I'll amend my rule, and the way I can sort of excuse that if that's the case is, well, Michael Keaton's in it and he's Batman, so there's that. But as of right now, my stance is DC live action. I'll try and trek out to the theater provided cases are manageable, and Marvel. Disney Plus. I'll see you soon. So that's my theater planning as of right now. So we'll see. Because at least you have a drive-in, within relative range of you.
The windows are small for how long they keep movies, but it's been a lifesaver. I haven't been to a theater in 2 years, but having that there, this is now like the third movie that I've gone to see there. So
do you think they'll stay open for Morbius?
Morbius was advertised last night. So
okay, all right.
Yeah. So if circumstances come together, I may be able to go see that as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, cool. Yeah. They really got to install more drive-ins around here, in my opinion. Like
the funny thing is, I remember when I was a kid. Obviously, that was a while ago. Drive-ins were everywhere. They were all the rage.
Yeah.
And now they are few and far between. So
yeah. So I say, bring them back.
Yes.
Whoever I have to appeal to, hashtag. Bring back the drive-in. Restore the drive-in.
Restore the drive-in verse.
yeah.
We're never going to be able to get away from that hashtag.
Unfortunately, it's never going to go away. It's like, wow.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
I was going to make an analogy, but I better stop. Because I can get myself in more trouble. Anyway.
We got to try to keep it PG-13 now.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Hey, listen.
Yeah.
But, yeah. All right. So, that's the story that led us to seeing the Batman. So now let's talk about the Batman. Donnie, where were your expectations for this film going in?
Expectations were I just wanted something that unto itself was entertaining. I just didn't want it to be awful. I'm just happy to be back and be able to see movies in some kind of capacity.
Uh-huh.
And obviously the bar is high. There have been a lot of people to play great Batmen and to play great Batman villains. So I just wanted this to be able to sit beside the rest of the legacy and not be a glaring misstep. And it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was, I think, one of the better Batman movies. I wouldn't say it's the best, but we'll get to our ratings on that later.
Yeah, for me, it was, I had actually streamed with the guys over at the Vigilante 1939 last weekend. And I had said on there that, all this film had to do to satisfy me was be a really good Batman movie. That was my thing going in. My pie in the sky is that I wanted it to recreate the experience, make me feel like a 6-year-old again when I walked into 1989. Right. Because that's the kind of connection I have with this character. So if all things are firing on all cylinders and the movie is as good as I want it to be, that's the effect that it has on me. But that's not a requirement for me to enjoy it. No. To enjoy it, I just want a good Batman movie. So there are two.
Stay tuned for the end of the episode. I'm going to tell you what I think is the one way that this movie succeeded in a way that no other previous Batman movie had succeeded.
I like those stay tuned to the end because you force people to stay.
That's right.
Because they probably tuned out already. But anyway, for the ones that are still here, they can stay and wait for the end. Maybe Nick Fury will show up. No, different universe.
Hey, you don't know that he's not going to step through that portal someday. We don't know.
You probably have Samuel Jackson somewhere in your house. Comes over for a coffee or a stronger beverage because who knows what he like.
Right. Well, he's not going to find any of that here, but I'll give him some coffee.
But no. So my requirement was just be a good Batman movie. It's like my requirement is I never want to see the franchise go from strong, solid entries to a Batman and Robin equivalent.
That's exactly where my mind was. Yes.
And it delivered on being a good Batman movie. Did it deliver on giving me that feeling like I had when I was 6? Well, you have to wait till my rating to find out in the course of this review. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, let's get right into it, Donnie. Give us set the scene. What are some of the things you want to talk about? Let's dig deep.
Okay, well, let's call out just a few creatives here. Director Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright, John Turturro, Peter Sarsgaard, Andy Serkis, and Colin Farrell. And we also have the cinematography by Greg Fraser. So music by Michael G. And I don't know how to say that name. You're the Italian expert here. Can you tell me?
Michael Giacchino.
Giacchino. There we go. See, that's why you're part of a team on a podcast. You
that's
need one another
to pronounce Italian related names.
You pronounce those, and I'll give you all the alien names from Green Lantern. So
sounds like a plan.
So, how far were we into the podcast before I mentioned Green Lantern? What are we at?
14 minutes and 59 seconds.
That's a record.
It is, because it's the only time we actually tracked it. But from now on, we're going to do it.
Although I did mention St. Walker right off the bat. So
yeah,
anyway.
So I'll have to go back and look again. But I'll mark a note. I'll put a note in the description.
So actually, the movie opens up with the murder of Mayor Don Mitchell by the Riddler. And I've got to say that they set the tone right away. Brutal opening scene, horror movie visuals, love the atmosphere. And I didn't exactly know what was going on at first, but it became clear. And it's like, wow, this is definitely going to be a Batman movie that stands on its own. It's going to go in its own direction. And I liked the way that they opened up.
Yeah, for me, it was like at first, because, you see somebody watching from a rooftop across another rooftop, from one rooftop to another, and he's on the rooftop. And you see, like, I guess the visuals of a binoculars or a microscope or whatever the hell he was using. And you hear heavy breathing, so you're like, wait a minute. Is that Batman or is that the Riddler? Like, you don't know at first.
Right, yeah.
And then when you're watching what's happening in the window across, you see somebody in a ninja outfit come and supposedly stab another person, but it's actually just a kid play fighting on Halloween with his presumed father, right?
Right.
But so right there and then you're confused. Right off the bat, you're like, okay, it's Batman. And then you're like, oh, damn it, he's hugging him. No, it's not Batman. It's probably the Riddler. Or it still could be Batman, but it's not Batman it's not identifiable as Batman. And then, the funny part is the guy's on the phone and the TV's on, he's walking back and forth. And then there's just one moment where the light hits a certain way and you see like the Riddler stalking him, and I'm like, oh, that's freaky. That's creepy. And the way they did it is like, you're right, it's horror movie vibes without being excessively gory, because there's no need to. Like the point gets across without going in excess. So that's why when people say, oh, why not do a rated R Batman? Why do you have to? When you can film it like this, and the same desired effect occurs.
Right. I will say this, though. I think for a 5 or 6 year old kid, this is not an appropriate movie. I know people like to think that all comic book characters are appropriate for, family fare.
Yeah.
Yes, Batman has been that in the past, but this was a different direction. It wasn't gratuitous, like Adam's saying. It wasn't, like blood and guts, but it was made to be scary. And I don't think, number one, I think a kid might be scared. I also think a kid may be bored with a lot of the like investigative angles that we see with this movie. There's a long time between action scenes. Not that they're boring to most people, but for a 5 or 6 year old, they may be like, hey, when are we getting to the action?
I would say, look, depending on your kid, 10 or up is what I would say.
Yeah. Now, my youngest kid, 13 years old, a fan of The Walking Dead, so I didn't have to worry about.
Oh, yeah. But that's, I mean, PG-13 suggests that, 13 and upwards, you're good. But I'm just saying for me, like, if I was a parent, which I'm not, at least on this universe,
right,
on this earth, I'm not. And if someone comes to the door claiming to be mine, we're gonna have an interesting conversation. But as of right now, I'm not. Just depend again. If you're a parent, depending on your kid, but I'd say, 10 and up, depending on how your kid reacts to certain things, go for it. But yeah, that's my recommendation. But carry on.
So, and we talked about the atmosphere being different for this movie. In the past, and again, I'm a huge fan of the Batman Begins movie as well as Batman 89. Yeah. Yes, love them both. But we saw, Batman's kind of modus operandi in those was to, basically come in with stealth and take people down as quickly as possible, very fluent in the way that fluid in the way that he would do it. Yeah. With this one of the first things we saw was, Batman kind of announcing himself to, the thugs on the street with this kind of thudding gait, and you would hear the footsteps, like him coming down a set of steps, announcing, "Here I come," and using that fear that he had obviously already established.
Now you talk about the fear that he uses, and I love the fact that they show the bat signal and it's lit, and they show a bunch of criminals' reaction to the bat signal, and like they're scared, they're crapping their pants,
right,
yeah. And running just at the sight of the bat signal. So right there, that's showing you this is the fear that he uses and inspires in the criminal element. And I think this is the best they've showed. I mean, they showed it a little bit in The Dark Knight with that one, the signal and the guy in the car saying, "Oh, I'm getting out of here." But other than that, right, this to me is the best usage of, without showing Batman right away, look how afraid these people are of him.
Yeah, the aura that he has established, and it says 2 years in the movie that's how long this version of Batman has been active.
This is year 2, folks.
Yes, yes.
And you know what else I liked in addition to that? Was Bruce's narration.
Likewise.
At the beginning and at some point throughout. Because you know what it reminded me of, Donnie? It reminded me of, those thought bubbles where you're getting the character's perspective in the comics?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the voiceover reminded me of.
That's a valid point. Yeah. I will say that there was one thing that my youngest kiddo did not like about this, and that's something that I liked. I will say to start this is that they didn't go back and rehash the death of Batman's parents again.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
And I'm fine because again, we've seen that 3 times on film and live action.
Yeah.
But of course, they you see Bruce watching a newscast, and it mentions 20 years ago. The Waynes were murdered. And of course they called out, Thomas and Martha. And as soon as, they said Martha, I was like, why would you say that name? And my kiddo was like, oh.
She thought she was going to get, wait a minute. So she rolls her eyes when you do that, but yet she wanted to see the death of the Waynes again. Does she realize she's setting herself up for more of that?
Yeah, exactly.
But what's hilarious is when they mentioned her on the TV, the first thing I thought of was, when Donnie sees this, he's going to say.
So, and I said it loud too. I was like, why would you say that name? The funny thing is I wished, with this whole, drive-in, theater of people, I wish that I'd have had it right at that second, a megaphone, but nobody would have been able to know who it was. Why did you say that name?
You probably would have scared half the people there. No, but no, I was fine with the lack of origin, and not the lack of origin, the lack of death scene.
Right.
And here's why: because the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne was ever present without seeing it.
Yes.
Right. It was a motivator. It was a consequence, and we didn't have to see it, and that's fine by me, because again, everybody and their grandmother at some point in their lives has seen those 2 people gunned down in an alley. For me, we didn't need to see it again. But just good to go back to your point of, how Batman intimidates, as he's walking into a scenario.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many thugs there that were going to mug that guy. There was about 6, 7.
I think it was maybe more than that. There was a large group, yes.
And the way he just takes them on, the fight scenes in this whole movie, I thought were expertly done, because here's why. Again, I'm not gonna suddenly start hating the Dark Knight trilogy because I love it, just because there's a new shiny toy that I can enjoy. But and I've always said this, you can track back. One thing I couldn't stand about the Dark Knight trilogy, being a martial artist, was the fight scenes and the fact that they were choreographed mostly terribly, and you couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
Here you get to see all the fight, all the movements, all the punches, all the kicks.
Now, I did like the fighting in The Dark Knight because I like the Casey style that they used, but the fighting here is very realistic and very brutal. Yeah. It's not a lot of like, flowery type of, a martial art where, he's using finesse.
Yeah.
He is showing that he's stronger and faster and just better educated in physicality than all the criminals.
He certainly does have a brutality to him that's sort of in step with the Ben Affleck version.
Yeah, you could see this version eventually growing into the Ben Affleck version 20 years down the line.
Yeah. So yes, that scene where he pummels the guy to a pulp, announces himself as "I'm vengeance," and then continues punching him, was even better in the film than it was in the trailer, and it was damn awesome in the trailer. Yeah. So that was great. But what I loved about that scene, Donnie, is the guy that he's saving says, "Please don't hurt me." Like, it's not like, "Oh, thank you very much," and what can I do to repay you? Like, even the people he's saving are scared of him, and that's the point. Right?
Exactly. I mean, that he obviously has established himself in this city, and regular civilians fear him. And at the same time, another thing that I liked in this is, outside of Commissioner Gordon, most of the policemen didn't seem to like him very much.
Right. Yeah.
Which is realistic. You got to think that police would not approve of a vigilante, no matter how good they are at getting results.
Right.
That's a conflict between kind of lawful good and chaotic good.
All right. Since you brought it up, you want to talk about Gordon and not only Jeffrey Wright as Gordon, but also the relationship and the partnership that we see between Batman and Gordon in this. So let's talk about that.
Well, this is another thing that from the get-go here, you see that Gordon and Batman have a very good working relationship with one another. They don't have to, kind of grow to trust one another the way we saw in the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah.
Or even in the way that we saw with the 89 Batman movie. We see that they've established a partnership, much to the chagrin of a lot of the other cops. They don't approve of it. But Jim Gordon sees the necessity for Batman. And I really love the give and take when the scene with the thumb drive.
Yeah.
Which was one of the, and again, I'm going to reiterate, not a kid's movie.
See, there is some humor though. Yeah. That's what I like about it. Is it's a serious, dark tone, but they do imbue it with some humor, which is and the thumb drive is.
Yes.
I mean, it's dark humor because it's literally a severed thumb.
It's literally a severed thumb that works a drive.
Access a car, but the thumb drive is funny.
Right. So but we see that there is a mutual respect, even though Gordon doesn't know that Batman is Bruce Wayne in this.
Yeah.
Because he says, I've known you for 2 years, but I don't know who you are under that mask.
Yeah. And what I like about it is, again, we're in year 2. He established in the voiceovers that he's been working with Gordon, right? And so we don't have to see that transition from Gordon's trying to apprehend him, and then now, over time they grow. There's nothing wrong with that. I love the way it was handled in Begins and the Dark Knight trilogy, but there's a different way to do it, and this is the different way. And I appreciate that we're just jumping into the pre-existing relationship, right? And they really are. There is a dynamic duo in this movie. It's Batman and Gordon, and not Batman and Robin, but there is a dynamic duo.
Right.
And what's interesting about that, Donnie, is Matt Reeves has said many times that his Batman fandom started with Batman 66.
Mm-hmm.
And in Batman 66, Batman is often working with the police, specifically Gordon. Now, in that version, because they're so inept, they pick up a phone and say, "Come solve this for us," and Batman comes. And, but I think the homage for the reason to create a working relationship with Batman and Gordon is to honor, obviously the comics, and I think it very mirrors his relationship with Gordon and how it plays out in the animated series, this movie, right? It's a lot, there's a lot in common between the two in the relationship between Batman and Gordon. But specifically, I think that was a clever way for Matt Reeves to give a nod to 66 without saying, yeah, we work together, but you're so inept that you're going to let me do everything.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was a nod to 66, but then taking it in a much more mature, better direction than just Batman coming in and doing everything for them.
Right. Yeah. And it's a good point that you made that we saw a dynamic duo without having to incorporate Robin, because it would be hard to incorporate Robin into the kind of atmosphere that we saw with this movie.
Although Reeves said in interviews he's open to it, so we'll see if he does. I mean,
yeah, eventually you could, but a very young Batman.
Yeah.
And again, as the way Robin is. Although, by the way, did you pick up the fact that Selena Kyle at the end of the movie mentioned Bloodhaven?
Because I know where my multiverse wife is going. And she's going to Bloodhaven, and I'm following her there, damn it. See, jumping ahead, let me just say that.
By the way, for those of you who don't know, that's where Nightwing operates. So.
Yeah. But let me just say, I want to jump to the end of the movie real quick, because the scene Donnie's talking about is, Bruce or Selena asked Batman to go with her. Now, Batman pauses for a second and then kind of, without saying directly, the look between the two is like, I can't go, and she knows he can't go. But I gotta tell you right now that if I was Batman, Gotham would be screwed, because I would have hightailed it out of there so fast. Gotham wouldn't know I hit it. I would have left them off to their own devices. Screw you people, you're on your own. But that's just me. That's why I wouldn't be a good Batman. That's why I wouldn't be a good Green Lantern, because I got no willpower. Because if she says, let's go, I'm going. And you know why? Because Zoe Kravitz is on the list. Now, back to where we were in the movie. So that was a segue.
I thought about you a lot, because there was a lot of, very longing glances exchanged between, Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz. And I was just like, oh, okay, yeah.
And if point of view driven, yes, man, Reeves, I wanted to be Batman in those situations. Yeah. Well done. You've gotten to my mindscape. Shame on you. Yeah. But yeah, back to where we were. The scene where what really kind of sets up the relationship between Batman and Gordon is when Batman just walks in behind him to the crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's not after the fact, like he's there, and Gordon is like, and the cop's trying to stop him, and Gordon's like, no, let him through. And there's one scene where Gordon hands him a letter that's addressed to him, to the Batman, and one of the cops complains he's, that's tampering with evidence. He's and Gordon's like, he's got gloves on.
He's got gloves on.
Like, to make the allowance for him. He's like, well, he's got gloves on. Let him through. And just to the point of Batman, we talked about, this is very much a detective story. Mm-hmm. And there's always been a promise of Batman, they always tell you, Batman's the world's greatest detective, right? That's the tagline.
Right.
And, in Batman 89, we got a scene where he's on the computer, and the computer's spitting out, on the screen it has what's in the toxin, right? So that's the detective work in that movie. In The Dark Knight, it's got the thing where he's re-engineering the bullet. That's one scene.
Right.
But it's always been a little scene here or there. It's never been a full movie directed to Batman the detective as it is in this movie. Like, this is literally the world's greatest detective on display. Mm-hmm. And seeing him on the scene, seeing him piece together the details of each riddle and where that's going to lead him and who the next murder victim is. Like, this is stuff that, as a Batman fan of various degrees, we've always dreamed of seeing. And so that's what really makes this movie unique. And again, I like the fact that both Batman and Gordon are useful in solving the riddles, solving the crimes, or catching the Riddler. It's not just, all right, Batman's here, I'm gonna go have a coffee and a donut.
Right.
Like, he's in the thick of things. You know what I mean? So
yes,
both guys get over, to use a wrestling term, in this movie. So, and
which is why they both got a push. So
yeah, right, yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't think there's the dad jokes, but I didn't think, Gary Oldman is a fantastic Jim Gordon. I didn't expect anybody to, I'll be honest with you, come close or top that performance. And dare I say, Jeffrey Wright has done that.
He did an outstanding job.
Yeah. So there's that.
The point that I want to make about this, you brought up some of the characters here, and I don't mean this in a bad way, because it's not to say that these are in name only characters, but this is such a grounded movie that when you see, the Penguin, Catwoman, the Riddler, these are nothing like the stylized versions that we usually see in animation and that we've previously seen. This is something that Batman is really kind of the only character that visually, stands out as the previous versions that we know. Sure. Now, the Riddler does wear a very unsettling costume. I like the way the Penguin looked. I like the way the Catwoman looked.
It's green, yeah.
They were very different than what we had seen before.
Yeah, like here's what I'll say. And it's not just me saying, it's Matt Reeves. But when you look at Catwoman, it's clearly her year one era version, right? When you look at Riddler, it's a totally different look. Yes, he's wearing green. Yes, he's wearing a question mark. But what Matt Reeves has said is that these are the villains before they become the mythical, larger-than-life personalities that they are. Like, they're on their way there, but they're not yet. The closest to being fully formed, and he's not even fully formed yet, is Batman. Mm-hmm. So Matt Reeves says that there will be, he's hinted that there will be more evolution into the characters that we know. Now, their costumes may not be as if we ever see Paul Dano again as the Riddler, I don't think we're going to see him in a green jumpsuit with question marks all over the place
and a bowler hat.
And a bowler hat. Yeah, I just don't see it. But
yeah,
we'll get something closer to a comic book look if we see him again down the line, according to what Matt Reeves has said, like the inferences he's made. Yeah. But in saying that they're different, like the Riddler is very much in keeping with what the Riddler would do. Like it's not like, he uses riddles. He's a murderer. Like, I mean, the comics plays them off, in some comics, kind of lightly brushed that aside. They don't focus on it because, you're trying to appeal to a certain age there, so you kind of gloss over it. But let's make no bones about it. Riddler in the books isn't opposed to murdering people either, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, he's not, I'm just going to torment you, but then I'll let you go home. Like, if he had to, the Riddler would kill it and would kill somebody, right, in the comics. So, but let's talk about, before we go on to Catwoman and the Riddler specifically, and the larger plot at play, let's talk a little bit about, we talked about Batman and Gordon. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Bruce, Batman, and Alfred relationship.
Okay.
Alfred, of course, played by Andy Serkis.
Sure. One thing I want to say before we get into that, which will feed into this. Yeah. So I'm going to call out one of the toxic fandoms here right now, and I'm not talking about the Snyder Cut people. What I'm talking, the people who, there will be someone usually who knows nothing about comics who will tweet out, well, if Batman or the Waynes just use their fortune to, give money to all the poor people in Gotham, then there would be no need for Batman, yada, yada, yada. First of all, that's not original. That's been around forever. And you saw in this movie that with the renewal project, that the Wayne family, although flawed, and we see that Thomas Wayne in particular made a big mistake, that they had been trying to use their fortune to better Gotham with the renewal project.
Yeah.
So this wasn't just an issue of Batman, an angry young man wanting to go out and beat people up. He is trying to, from every angle, improve Gotham.
Yeah. That complaint is so ridiculous.
And I see it all the time. And everybody who tweets it out or whatever, they're convinced that they're the first person to think of it. No, you're not.
And also, Batman wouldn't last this long as a character if he just paid the problems away.
Yes.
Like, we got to tell stories here. That's not a compelling story. Hey, look, it's a nice, heartwarming story. And if the world worked that way, wouldn't it be nice if the real world worked that way? Like you could solve, technically, if you could solve world hunger just by throwing money at it. It's not that simple, but if the world was that simple, it'd be nice. But that's just not the way things work.
Right.
But yeah, it's a ridiculous. Everybody thinks they're so smart when they tweet that out, and it's like, really, like you don't if you don't like Batman stories or Batman comics, here, don't watch them, don't read them.
Yeah.
If Batman beating up criminals bothers you so much, don't engage in the story.
Yeah.
Walk away. Read something else.
And it's almost always people who aren't fans of comics or this type of story.
They've never picked up a book in their life. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. But so usually we see a very warm, close-knit, loving relationship between Batman and Alfred, Bruce and Alfred.
Right. Yeah.
This version is fractured a good word?
That's a good way to put it. There's affection, but it's somewhat dysfunctional. They don't communicate with one another very well. There's obviously this, kind of barrier between the two of them where Alfred and he even said, I tried to be your dad, but I'm not your dad.
Yeah.
And that's what you needed.
And what's interesting is I think it stems from, at this stage in his life, Bruce is so laser focused on Batman is the real Batman is who I am. Nothing else matters. Like, to get anything done in the city, to make things better, I have to be all in on this. Batman 24/7. Right? And that's what Alfred is like. No, like you're losing yourself in this endeavor. You need to realize that there's more. Like, you need to start paying attention to Bruce Wayne and being Bruce Wayne. And that's where the rift comes from, is that Alfred would like him to be a fully fledged, multi-functional human, in the sense that there are other things besides this mission that you need to be doing. And Bruce is like, if I can't make a difference here, then life as Bruce Wayne doesn't matter.
And that's a very valid take on the character. We saw that a little bit with Michael Caine's version.
Yeah.
Remember, he said, if you pretend to have fun, you may just have a little by accident.
Yeah, right. So. But that was played very much, there was still a loving,
Yeah.
Not that Bruce and Alfred in this don't have love and affection for each other, but that was more, that version, it was, yes, he had that reservation, but at the end of the day, they still, like, there was still an element of Bruce Wayne there. It wasn't a playboy billionaire until he developed that, but he was still Bruce Wayne. Like, when you see Robert Pattinson's version, again, literally, even when he's not, the rare times that he's not in the costume, he's still, for lack of a better word, Batman. Right?
Yes.
And that's because, again, and I've seen some complaints about that, but again, this is year 2. They're borrowing from I see a lot of Earth 2 in it. Earth 2. Have you read Earth 2 by Jeff Johns?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
so
yeah.
like that's what I see here. Like right now, he's so laser focused on Batman. As we see the end of this, he realizes I got to go about this a different way. And I believe in further films, you'll see the development of the Bruce Wayne billionaire playboy facade. But the fact that it's not here right now does not, for people saying, well, he didn't play Bruce Wayne at all. But he hasn't developed that persona yet.
That didn't need to be here.
They're trying to
really
create character progression. So the fact that you don't see it yet, doesn't mean it isn't a good interpretation of Batman Bruce Wayne. It just means he hasn't grown into that yet. A lot of things he hasn't grown into. He hasn't even fully finalized what his Batman is.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know until the very end what he needs to be.
Right.
So, but what I liked about despite their fractured relationship, you definitely see that Alfred is the only, so as of right now, the only thing keeping whatever elements of Bruce Wayne are still left in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever humanity Bruce Wayne is clinging onto and not being even more absorbed by this Batman persona is because of Alfred.
By the way, the bomb scene where we thought Alfred, at least I thought for a little bit that Alfred had died. He just gets badly injured, but
I'm like, you better not pull a Tom King and kill Alfred because I
was like, no, not Alfred.
No, but I like just like even the fact that.
By the way, I almost tweeted you that picture when we had another podcast planned for this weekend too. It didn't work out for this weekend because of time constraints. I almost tweeted you that I messaged you with the Michael Caine picture. I failed you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway.
No. But even before that, I love that Alfred, like he wasn't in here a lot, but when he was here, he was helping Bruce solve the riddles. And he's drawing back on his experience, as a member of the army in the British, the Secret Service, whatever it is. Like he's drawing back on all his experience and using that to help Bruce. And they even like teased that he taught him how to handle himself in a fight. So
yeah, he even said that I could teach you how to fight, but I can't be your dad. So
right, and so this is very much the Earth 1 Alfred, the one that we're seeing, and the scene that you mentioned earlier in the hospital after, like when you see Batman when he figures out that the Riddler is after Bruce Wayne. And that Alfred could be in danger. When he calls from the Batmobile, when he calls Wayne Manor.
Yeah.
And first of all, I love the fact that the voice changed. So that in that moment, that again, there are moments when Bruce Wayne, right now it's Batman and that like even though he's an adult, when he's talking with Alfred, you get a sense that he's that hurt 8 to 10-year-old boy in a grown man's body, right? Like in his reactions, right?
Yeah.
Like when he says, there's a moment that he says to Alfred, he goes, "Stop trying to push me to do this. You're not my father." Right? That's the reaction of an angry, hurt child. That's something that an angry, hurt child would say to
exactly
parental figure. So when I see but when you see that moment in the Batmobile, and the voice drops, I'm like, there's what little is in there of Bruce Wayne just came out right now, and it was just in the switch of the voice and the look in his eyes beneath the cowl was, and I'm like, that shows you what a hell of a performance Pattinson's putting on here.
Well, and I'd like to say too, there was the part where, where Bruce learns the truth about, the shortcut that his dad took because of the campaign, and we learned that it was really just his dad trying to protect, his wife and his son, but that he was involved with Falcone, and we saw that Bruce went as Bruce to try to figure out what happened here because he was concerned about his family's legacy. He wanted to know the truth.
Yeah.
That wasn't a Batman thing.
Yeah, no, and that all comes after, or around the same time as the Alfred scene, but that hospital scene where it's like, where Alfred says what you had said, it was like, you needed a father and I couldn't be there for you. And he reaches out his hand and Bruce grabs it and he says, don't blame yourself. Kind of like, you are, for lack of a better word, you are my father kind of thing. Without saying it, it's that acknowledgement of no, don't lessen your impact. You did right by me. And that was it was small, it was a small moment, it was very powerful. And then of course he sees the bat signal and he knows, all right, and they both look at it like, all right, you gotta go, right? But you're right, the scene with Falcone, where he confronts Falcone.
That was the go get him tiger moment.
Yeah, and again, so you do see Bruce Wayne come out.
That's a different universe, by the way. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
But you do see moments where Bruce Wayne does kind of start emerging, and that's one. And I gotta say, now that you're mentioning Falcone, John Turturro. My God, was he fantastic as Falcone.
This was an amazing cast, and that's why the people out here who wanted to hate this movie before they ever saw it, I think you're shorting yourself by not giving this a chance.
Right, I agreed, but it's like everything from John Turturro's performance was ripped out of The Long Halloween. Like, and there's the scene where he's talking to Bruce in his office and explaining, your father's a good guy. This is a situation. The guy was, he did what he did, not because he cared about political aspirations, but it's because he cared about your mother. And in those moments, look, throughout the movie, you come to realize that Falcone is a jerk. Like he makes you want to hate him. But even in that moment, you're like, he's right. Like you start to side with Falcone in that brief moment, and it's like, he's right. He's not wrong, right? But he was great. I love the scene where he talks to Bruce about the funeral outside the funeral for the Congress, the mayor, the congressman. What is he?
Wasn't the I forget which one that was.
One of the two, but so outside the funeral scene, Falcone introduces the Penguin to Bruce Wayne, and he talks about the moment where one time Thomas Wayne had to save his Falcone from a bullet wound, and they couldn't.
Oh, yeah, right. So that was right before the collar bomb scene with Coulson.
Yeah.
Oh, that was magnificent. That was
Yeah, right out of Long Halloween. And he's like, we went to Wayne Manor, and he's like, he operated on me right on the table, and young Bruce here saw it from up top, and the whole thing is like, you think he did that for no reason? And Bruce is like, yeah, he was upholding the Hippocratic Oath, and Falcone starts laughing because that's what you think. Maybe it was like because he owed me one, right, or whatever. So, but it was right out of Long Halloween, and so I love Falcone. And now that I mentioned the Penguin, good Lord, Colin Farrell. I mean, talk about disappearing into the role.
Exactly.
Like,
and I love, by the way, and just one, but I don't want to sidetrack. I want you to be able to finish your thoughts. But the way they used the Batmobile, they built up,
get there,
and use that, like intertwine that with the Penguin story. I thought that was a stroke of brilliance that you didn't just, by the way, here's the Batmobile. We actually saw that, kind of built up to, and it introduced at a perfect moment to deal with the Penguin. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, but just like like he totally disappeared. Like the vocal thing was totally not Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
Obviously the prosthetics and all that, and he does look like there's this great image of the Penguin by Alex Ross that Matt Reeves and the prosthetic team literally took that image and transported it around to Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
It's
like I said, he didn't look like the Penguin you would expect, but that's not a bad thing. He looked in a way, and I also love the scene, by the way, where Batman and Jim leave him tied up, and he's like, "Wait, come back here, you jerks!"
because they're interrogating him because he's basically pushing the drug, right? And
right.
like he's taken over for, I think it was Maroni that was doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And ever since Maroni was taken down, he is sort of behind the scenes trying to usurp Falcone's power, and so
that's another little nice touch. You saw all the like drop users and kind of these dark corners of Gotham. Yeah. Another realistic touch there.
Yeah.
Seeing people very desperate that turning to those drugs.
And it's like that Penguin again. Like I said, they took that Alex Ross image, and then the version of the Penguin that they're kind of playing off of is the one. I don't know if you've ever played the Batman and Telltale games.
But
have you ever heard of them?
Oh yeah, I've heard of them, but yes.
That's the version of the Penguin they're going for. And Matt Reeves has said as much, but if you've played those games, you'll get a sense of that right away. But just like the arrogance of Penguin, that he even in the public facade is that he's an underling of Falcone. But in private, he has this bravado, this arrogance, that even when Batman's interrogating him in that scene in his office when he first sees Selina, and my God, what an entrance she made.
I thought about you when that happened, by the way.
She was looking at Bruce, and I was looking at her the whole time. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened in the scene?
I had no doubt. I
lost total control of my consciousness there, Donnie. It was all a blur. But but like he's got such an arrogance about him that even when Batman's interrogating, he's like, "You can't touch me." Like he has that sensibility about him, like that he's almost laughing in Batman's face, like you can't touch me. I'm just placating you right now because I can. Right? Yeah. And I love that. And you're right when he's like, there was a line when Batman and Gordon he's like, "What is this? Good cop, bad shit cop," or something like that. I was dying of laughter. Yeah. But Colin Farrell's performance made me so eager for the Penguin spinoff that they're planning, the HBO Max series.
It definitely has possibilities. It definitely established this version of the Penguin as a complex character.
Yeah, so that was great. And while we're on the subject, and then we'll go to Bruce and Catwoman, Batcat, and all that good stuff. But the Batmobile, I know when it first got released, everybody's like, "Oh, but it doesn't look like a Batmobile; it's just a car. What are we gonna do? It doesn't have,
Well, neither did the Tumbler, but I loved it. So
yeah,
it still works.
But it
can still work.
There's 70s comics where, for better or worse, the Batmobile is basically just a car. Yeah. But anyway, the entrance of that vehicle onto the scene. I've never seen an entrance for a car like that. Like, even the car scared the crap out of me for a second there, Donnie.
Yeah.
Like, no wonder criminals crap their pants every time there's a hint of that signal going in the air, because that car looked like it was like a killer. Matt Reeves referenced the movie Christine. That's the vibe he was going for.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I could see it. Okay. And that Batmobile chase probably was one of the best ever put to film. It's between that and Batman Begins. And I'll tell you why. Because in this, there are moments where it transitions to a point of view kind of shot, and it's as if you're in the car. So this is one of the rare times that you feel like you're driving the Batmobile in this scene. And it's insane.
I just want to say that I thought the ending to that car chase was perfect too. We talk about cinematography, the way that it was upside down, and again, you hear Batman's like thudding footsteps, and you see the effect that it had on the Penguin when he's coming towards him upside down. I was like, this is amazing.
And then he just leans in and looks at him, and Penguin's like, "Oh, geez." Like there's a shot of Penguin's face, like, "Oh crap, I'm screwed."
Right, exactly.
So it just what a beautiful chase. What a great moment. Again, the cinematography was great. When the Batmobile is like not flying literally, but like through the air, like coming out of the fire, and like you even see the Batman's cape billowing a little bit out of the window.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
like this is some great shots. But yeah, that Batmobile was I'm like, oh, I want one. I'm like, I'm not a car guy by any means, which is weird considering my dad's a mechanic, but I digress. But you know, there are certain cars that I get excited for. You know, Kit from Knight Rider is one of them. The DeLorean from Back to the Future is another one. The Ghostbusters, you know, Ecto 1.
Ecto 1, yeah.
And any version of the Batmobile, I would love every single one of them in my garage.
Yeah,
including this one.
I'd love to have that live version of Optimus Prime that I tweeted you earlier this week.
Oh yeah. I forgot Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
But Donnie, we've kind of danced around the subject. You know my feelings on, especially when handled by a certain writer, and when overly obsessed by a former co-host. You know my thoughts on shipping and Batcat.
Yes, yes.
But let me reiterate, prior to having a Tom King be obsessed about it for at bare minimum 25 issues, and prior to having a crazy co-host who would equate everything under the sun to literally the promotion of Batcat, even when a show had, we were talking about Flash, he somehow bring in Batcat. But anyway, despite all that, I genuinely enjoy both of these characters. I enjoy the pairing of both of those characters, and in the right circumstances, they should get together, in my opinion. And I loved the interaction, the interplay, the chemistry, and the scenario that this version of Batman and Catwoman were put in. Both performers were great together.
Mm-hmm. A lot of chemistry.
I love the way like her storyline kind of weaved into the grander narrative. It was very intricate. The way, it started out with, she's already in the mix because she works at the Iceberg Lounge. And I love the fact that the Penguin's base of operation is the Iceberg Lounge from the comics. I love that.
Good point.
So, is this movie grounded in reality to a degree? Yes. And somehow, Donnie, I feel it's still slightly more fantastical than one Nolan presented. Because I don't think Nolan would have ever put in a location like the Iceberg Lounge.
I want to say that I think the chemistry between the two characters, very effective. I like the fact that it showed that Batman is not an emotionless guy.
Yeah.
The way that emotion was built, the way that the relationship was built, it had some very tender moments. You could tell that he was very empathetic to Catwoman. And likewise, she saw, the trauma that he had been through.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, again, I've seen some fans out there that are like, oh, it should have been like, and I'm not going to say it, most people know what I'm talking about. That picture that went around social media last summer, people were just like, oh, it should have been more visceral and been like this. And I'm like, no, it didn't need to be that.
You won't say it, but I'll say it. Listen, if you want to see that, go to Google, type in a particular kind of website, go to said website and type that in. I can't say with 100% certainty because I haven't looked for it, but I venture to guess that if you search certain things, you'll find it. I mean, if that's really what you want to see, you'll find it.
Watching them, and again, there were kids where I was watching this. I certainly didn't want to see that with my 13-year-old kid sitting next to me.
Yeah, anybody with a brain doesn't want to see that with a potential. Like, look, it's not a porn. It's a live action movie.
Yeah,
there's probably a porn parody somewhere. Go watch it. Have fun. But that's not what this is for.
But yeah, I prefer tenderness over. That's what a certain segment of fans wanted. So,
but it's like, like the whole thing about. I love the fact that she was working with again, at some point working with Batman. Like he gave her those contact lenses that allow him to see. By the way, I love that invention.
He didn't. There wasn't an overabundance of gadgets in this, but what was used, I thought was really effective. Like
those lenses that act like a camera that he can see.
Yeah.
Without being, everybody talks about, well, why can't the Batman suit have lenses? Because acting requires you to use emotion, like to equate emotion, especially when you're wearing a mask, with your eyes. You can't do that if they're covered in lenses.
Mm-hmm.
So the next best thing is what they came up with here. Those contact lenses, like regular contact lenses that you put in, and they're actually providing a video feed so that Batman can see or can record things and then analyze them later, which he did to help solve the riddles, which I like. But Selina was helping him get facial recognition on certain people in the club to try and figure out who was Riddler going to target next. And so that was really cool. And again, it stems from it all, like the way she gets intertwined in this is one of her friends is killed by Falcone.
Right.
And so she asked Batman, help me. First, it was to help her get out safely. And then later it became help me catch her killer. But even though they worked together and there was clearly romantic entanglement there, the film and Matt Reeves and the writers clearly still tried to set up that there is, not always, but for a good portion of time, there's potential for a rift between the two of them because Selina is tempted to use a gun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When she feels it's necessary. Whereas Batman is like, no guns. He even says that to Gordon at one point. He's like, yeah, man, that's your thing, not mine.
Right. Yeah. Gordon's like, I don't know about all that. I'm a cop. So
yeah. So there's always going to be a little rift between them.
I really love the visuals of the ending, by the way, with the two of them going.
It executes executes it.
Illustrates.
Yeah, thank you. I can't talk because I'm thinking about Zoe Kravitz and Jesus. She's, she's causing turmoil in the Multiverse Wives scenario, Donnie. I don't know what's going on. There's going to be a crisis because she's trying to take up the. Have you seen the photo shoot she did with the Catwoman cowl on and the milk?
No, I have not, but folks.
It's a crisis. Call for help. No. I need Dr. Harleen Quinzel to figure this out and cause me more problem, but I digress. Anyway, but yeah, like when they're riding together on the bikes, and then they come at a stop and they go divergent ways.
Yes.
Like it's like, there's always going to be that push and pull with them. But again, it's cool because they leave it open for her to come back, and I think she will. But I thought she was fantastic. Yes. In the role. I love the scene where she was trying to rob the safe. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that was Falcone's safe, correct if I'm wrong.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure because that's where she got the passport.
Yeah. I also love the interaction with the cats in her apartment.
Yeah. No, but the fight, we'll get to that. But the fight scene that I'm talking about, again, directly pulled out of Long Halloween. Mm-hmm. And the way they fought, it was it's funny because Batman, you see what happens when the heart is involved. Batman is kind of less aggressive and forceful with her. Like, he doesn't want to, go full force like he was with those thugs. Like, you can see him kind of at first trying to pull his punches because he doesn't want to, right?
Yeah, doesn't want to hurt her. Yeah,
and even she's like, when he slams her on the table in WWE style, but there's no Jim Ross to commentate that. But and she's like, oh, the bat and the cat, that has a nice ring to it. I'm like, all right, I'll allow one or two, but let's not veer into Tom King territory now. It's not
right.
Let's not derail the whole thing. But you're right, yeah. And then again, the humor. People say, "Oh, this is so dark. There's no humor." Yes, there is. The part about when he goes to her apartment and there's like a crap ton of cats, and he's like, "Got a lot of cats," and she's like, "I like, I have a thing for strays," which is,
yeah. And she looked directly at him when she said that. Like,
yeah. It's like if that isn't an indicator that she's flirting with you, you need to get those eyes checked and those lenses that you use to get checked too, if you can't see that. But no, I love their dynamic. The pusher, it was exactly like what you saw on the screen is what you'd find in the comic when you watch them interact, and I loved it. I thought, again, she was pulled right out of year one. And they even alluded to the fact, or not alluded to, they flat out said it. They're going with the continuity that she is the daughter of Carmine Falcone.
Also, wasn't that an allusion to Hush when there was a scene where she was going to try to kill him and Batman was like, no, you can't do that? Wasn't that kind of an allusion to the ending of Hush?
Yeah. But there's also, Donnie, as he's discovering why the Riddler is after Bruce Wayne, there's also a mention of a reporter, and the last name is Elliot.
Which is Hush, or we think,
Tommy,
right?
Tommy Elliot is Hush.
Right.
So I wonder if this reporter is a family member of some nature to Hush. I think Hush would fit in perfectly with Matt Reeves' sensibilities.
Oh yes.
And I'd like to see it. Where do I give Warner Brothers my money to allow Matt Reeves to do that in the sequel? Because
if they make another couple of sequels to this, I'm in.
Yeah, and so yeah, but the Catwoman Batman stuff was great. What we find out is that basically, just before I move off Catwoman, how can I phrase this okay? Aside from one, or with the exception of one, we've never had a bad Catwoman. And you know which the one is. I'm not going to say it because poor girl, she already accepted a Razzie for it. Leave her alone. But you know which one I'm talking about. But aside from that, we've always had solid Catwomans. And Zoe Kravitz is among, the top tier of Catwoman. I don't know where I rank her yet. I know where she is on the Multiverse Wives list. I don't know where. Earth 11. I don't know
Earth 11, yeah. You said.
I don't know where she is on the Catwoman list yet, but she's near the upper echelon. So what we ultimately find out is that the Riddler's, he's been going after high-ranking officials. And the last victim that he wants to target is Bruce Wayne. And the reasoning is because of what Falcone revealed earlier, that during his campaign, Thomas went to Falcone to have a reporter who was sniffing around his family history silenced. Now, he didn't want him killed. He just wanted him scared. But then, of course, the mob being the mob, once you get in bed with those guys, you never know how they're going to, if Falcone said it, if fear doesn't get the job done, well, then you gotta go the next step, right? And so, obviously Thomas regretted that, and there was a scene where they alluded to the fact that he wanted to go to the police, but then a week later he was dead. But so, and the whole history, what Thomas wanted to keep on the wraps was that Martha,
I just said a name,
is an Arkham, of the famous Arkhams that are responsible for that asylum. And she had bouts with, she had a mental breakdown. She had a bout with a mental illness. And Thomas wanted to keep that from coming out around the campaign. I don't think he cared about the campaign. Again, as Carmen Falcone was telling Bruce, it was more he cared about what it would do to Martha and Bruce if that became public knowledge. And that is right from the Earth One graphic novels. That's taken right out of that. And I love it because it's an intriguing layer to Bruce's history. Like, imagine being the heir of, in a sense, the Wayne family and the Arkham family. And then we wonder why this guy is so messed up to the point that he puts on a batsuit and kicks the crap out of criminals every night.
Right.
But
another thing I want to point out, I liked the Riddler's soliloquy about why he hated Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
That he looked at his, being orphaned as, he still lived a life of luxury.
It's a phony orphan. In
right.
the sense that, look, you got to live in a mansion.
Yeah.
You got to go to the best schools. You got to spend time with, you had time with your parents before.
Whereas I know what it's like to be orphaned and destitute.
Yeah, right, yeah. And it's funny, so he resented Bruce for that, but he admired Batman for trying to make it Riddler was so warped that when he has that ending monologue, he thought that Bruce and him were doing the same thing. We're on the same side. And they weren't. And this is a catalyst, and I love the fact that they used, Riddler was broadcasting his insanity, live on the internet. And
with some really scary images, by the way.
Yeah, to attract other people, other deranged individuals, right? Mm-hmm. Who then take up his cause. And in the third act battle, when they're they're literally flooding Gotham, they're there holding machine guns and making sure to finish, anybody, while all that chaos is going on, they're trying to kill the newly appointed mayor, right? What's her name? Bella Real or whatever her name was. I think that was her name, right? So, and you're right, the imagery was disturbing. Like we had Riddler strap a bomb to Gil Coulson's neck, which was disturbing.
Yeah.
Then he had another guy.
Peter Sarsgaard did an outstanding job too, by the way.
And the funeral scene was so tense.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to quickly get back to that scene, Donnie, where the kid is, waiting for the funeral to start. And the way Bruce is looking at this kid, like he sees himself in that kid.
That it's alluded to several times that Batman sees kids like this, and that's why he's doing this. He doesn't want anyone to experience life the way that he did. And
that's what I mean about just the looks exchanged between Bruce and that kid. You know what that's about. You know that's the byproduct of his parents' death. We don't need to see that alleyway scene for it to have an effect. And that's the way this film handles that beautifully. And it's funny, when he saved the kid from the crashing car, I'm now don't get any ideas. He's still too young to be Robin. Leave the poor kid alone. Don't bring him into this. But yeah, so we had the Gil Coulson bomb, which was disturbing. You know what freaked me out, even though they didn't show anything? When he had the other guy's face in a vice, and the rats were going to go eat his face.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, you're one effed up SOB.
Right.
Like you, I don't think there's help for you, sir.
Right.
I don't think Arkham can help you.
Yeah, which rats actually would. Unlike, the hamsters or the guinea pigs in Dirch Devadam, I don't think that would work, but that would work here. So.
And when he left the message in the bat cage, and Batman's slyly going in there, and I'm like, that got us into a whole mess in 2019. I don't know if you want to be doing that, sir.
That's a good.
Stay away from the guy.
That's a good point.
Like, this is why I had to come see this movie at 11 o'clock, where there's only a handful of people here, because some fool wanted to play around with Batman. Let's not. I don't know if this is the same.
That's a good point. In the world we live in now, Batman would be a little less popular, I would think, with the cave full of bats.
I'm a little disturbed by that, by going into that cage, willy-nilly, trying to get that. But so the Riddler, and again, to get the desired result of being unsettling and disturbing, you don't need an R rating.
Exactly.
And this effortlessly shows that. But the third act flooding, I mean, we have 2/3 of a detective movie, and then 1/3 gets into full superheroic action in the third act. And I love the fact that we see the bat, like the chess symbol, what it is. Like, it actually is, part of his wonderful toys that allows him to cut through things. And so they do have a purpose, and I love that.
Very functional, right?
I mean, could there be borderline batarangs? Like, you throw that thing at somebody, if you hit them in the right spot, then they could be in trouble. Mm-hmm. But just like seeing Batman on that scaffolding, right, and on the scoreboard, and like hanging from the scoreboard,
mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is full on, third act Marvel movie kind of action.
Mm-hmm. When the action was far apart, but when they did introduce the action, especially at the end, it was done extremely well.
And I love when he gave a spear to that Riddler copycat. Did you see the Roman Reigns type spear?
Right. Yeah.
That was pretty cool. But even he, like,
I was actually thinking, acknowledge me when that happens. So.
Yeah, but as good as he is, like, he even takes a beating. Like, he even gets kind of disoriented, like, to the point where, Catwoman's gonna come in and.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. She saved him at one point, and
then
he's nearly unconscious.
Yeah. And so I love the whole bit, but what I said in my I did some Twitter thoughts before this review, and it's my new way of tweeting reactions to film by using Vince McMahon gifs. So if you want to see that, go look at my Twitter. But I said, in the third act, Batman goes from being a vigilante hell-bent on vengeance to a hero and a protector of Gotham. Mm-hmm. In that third act, that's what he becomes. And when he jumps into the water and start guiding people out of the mess with the light, I'm like, this is superhero Batman now. We've had detective Batman. Now we're transitioning into the superhero. And the whole flooding, the explosion of the city, that was taken right out of Zero Year, Batman Zero Year by Scott Snyder.
Okay.
And Greg Capullo. And again, it continues the motif where the first person Batman helps when they get, sort of out of the water and more to the surface level, or to solid ground, I should say, he helps the kid. He makes sure the kid gets off first. Then he helps the mayoral candidate. But then there's one shot near the end of the film where, they're still processing all the damage, and Batman's there.
Yeah.
And he's carrying this young, what is she, like a teenager, early 20s?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah.
He's carrying her out of to the medic thing, and the way that the sun, the dawn is kind of hitting, the light of the dawn is hitting Batman in that scene. It was just so beautiful, and I'm like, this is, and the voiceover he's narrating, he's talking about, I got to be something different.
Yeah, I've got to be more than just vengeance.
It can't be vengeance. It has to be hope. I have to inspire hope. And that is like, that
all will be well. Sorry.
Yeah. But that's, it's one thing to say, I'm about hope. And then for 2/3 of a movie, it looked like you're constipated. And I'm not going to name the movie, but you know what I'm talking about. You could tell me hope until you're blue in the face. You could tell me the symbol means hope. But what I want to see from my characters, if you're gonna start evoking hope, show it to me.
Good point.
And in that scene, I got it shown to me that this is character progression. So now what I expect is in follow-up films, I don't expect Batman to smile like a buffoon, because that's not bad. I mean, unless it's a George Clooney Batman, and God knows, I don't want to see any more of that crap.
No, thank you.
But what I want to see is, look, Batman's angry, Gotham is dark. Yes, that should always be there. But at the same time, I want to see the continuation of that hopeful figure.
Well, and he even said, you saw the effects of the flooding, that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
And the fact that the beauty of it is, so he puts her down and he's about to leave, and she grabs his arm, like begging, like asking him to stay, and he stays until she's airlifted out. And I'm like, I in the theater, I was kind of getting emotional. I'm like, what the hell? Like, I've always seen, in the Burton Schumacher films, there are plenty of examples of Batman being heroic. Mm-hmm. But there was something very emotional and visceral about this, and the way this played out, that it just hit me different than it did in any of those movies. Of all, I mean, that ending scene, those ending moments, gotta be some of my favorite in the film, if not my favorites. I mean, this is why I love that character, because yes, there's the darkness, he's a human. Look at the human. Forget about the money, but look at the human taking a terribly negative situation and turning it into a positive for the greater mass around him. Sure, he's got to crack some skulls to do it, but hey, at the end of the day, he's still so.
Well, and I love the aerial shot where you saw him when he's leading people out of the water.
Yeah.
That it's from the sky, and you see him, and everybody kind of flocked toward him.
Yeah.
And him being a leader, I really thought that was a powerful moment.
He became Gotham's protector in that scene, in those scenes, and I love this film for it. It's like such a beautiful piece of imagery. Like that's a beautiful piece of art. And Matt Reeves, Matt Reeves and Greg Fraser, man, did they just pull the heartstrings there. And look, I gotta give credit, because that scene doesn't have the same effect without Michael Giacchino's score.
Good point.
Donnie, that score is fantastic. Look, from a nostalgic point of view, Danny Elfman's score will always be the de facto Batman theme. Again, nostalgia. But good God, that score was brilliant.
Well, and you heard a lot of people saying how much they like the theme from this movie, how powerful it is.
I was humming it this morning. I woke up, I'm walking down the stairs, and I'm like, I'm going to do this until the sequel comes out, aren't I? So what a beautiful score. And you know what I like? If you notice the Catwoman theme, it's got that 40s noir, femme fatale kind of vibe to it. Yeah. And I'm like, this is perfect. And the Riddler's the Riddler's theme was appropriately, no pun intended, batshit crazy. Like, it evoked insanity. I'm like, yeah, that tracks. So beautiful score, and I can never not say this enough. Music is such a vital portion of a film.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoy it. I did take notice. A lot of times I won't remember scores.
Yeah.
But when a score is done really well, it does kind of get through to me. And on this one, I noticed that it really aided in setting the tone for a lot of different scenes.
Now, Donnie, did you notice in parts of the main Batman theme, there are little hints of like similarities to Shirley Walker's Batman work in Batman the Animated Series? There's touches of it, and
people are talking about that on social media. So
and you can really sense what I get a sense is Matt Reeves really kind of took some touchstones from the animated series with this movie, and I like it. To me, it just all worked together great. Now, before we rate it, we've got to talk about one of the last scenes of the movie, which is in Arkham. Well, I mean, the last scene, the last shot before the credits is Batman and Catwoman driving away, which we touched on.
Right.
Right. But I like that before the last shot of him, kind of with that, it was as much of a smirk for Batman as you're gonna get. Like, that's how it ended on, like a close up of his face. It was the equivalent of Batman. You know how Superman has that flying and then smirks at the camera.
Mm-hmm.
That was as close as we're gonna get to that with Batman on the bike driving away. And,
yeah.
That was that. But the scene I'm talking about is in Arkham Asylum. And what's his name? Riddler is there lamenting, I failed, and he's all pissed off at himself. And screw Batman, damn it, he's all upset. And we hear a voice from this next cell over saying, "Oh, don't worry, you did a good job. You really started something." And it's very creepy, yet somewhat jovial at the same time. And then he's talking about how he likes riddles, and he makes a riddle about being a friend to the Riddler. And then the Riddler asks, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Well," he says something to the effect of, some have referred to me as a clown.
Right.
And there's a shot, I don't know if you noticed, it was a real quick shot, but it's like his silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
And the hair.
Yes.
The position of the hair.
Mm-hmm. I noticed.
Like when he's laughing, you like the way his head is moving.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pan away and the laughter between the both of them start echoing. And Matt Reeves has confirmed it now. That's the Joker.
Right. I think a lot of fans will pick up on that's who that is. So.
And I don't know if Matt Reeves has said that doesn't guarantee that he's going to be in the next one. Like, he's like, I don't even know for sure. He's like, I got ideas, but I don't even know for sure who's going to. So that's not an MCU post-credit scene that alludes to like, this guy is definitely next.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he's out there is what Matt Reeves wanted to allude to. Yeah. That the purpose of that scene was to show that there's a power vacuum now because of the fall of Falcone that is now going to be taken up by the more insane element in Gotham City. But listen, if and when Matt Reeves wants to use the Joker, based on what he did with the Riddler and based on this little end tag, I'm like, yeah, give it to me.
There's going to be a lot of interest if he does.
Because look, people could say, well, we've seen the Joker so many times. But yeah, look, the Joker is one of the greatest cinematic or villains, period, in fiction. And can be reinvented as many times as Batman. So if a talented filmmaker on the level of Matt Reeves wants to use it, I say go for it.
No, I'm with you. I mean, we saw just, in 3 Jokers, 3 different versions of the Joker.
Yeah.
There's a lot. This is the kind of character that is so
book.
multifaceted. There are many different ways to approach it. And I think we could see the Joker and a very interesting new version of the Joker. So.
Yeah. So we'll see where that leads. But let's do final thoughts and a grade. So Donnie, take it away.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I thought this movie succeeded in a way that no other Batman movie had. Now, it doesn't mean that I think it's the best. I would put it at least behind Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. But for people who may not like comic book movies, if you have a friend or a family member, this movie is in many ways like a suspense movie, a murder mystery, almost a horror movie in some aspects with Batman. It works on its own in so many ways that even though the protagonist is handled very well, the structure of the film is so good that I think it could appeal to fans who may not want to see a comic book movie.
Yeah.
They may not care about, Batman and his quest against, and his vendetta against the Joker and his quest for justice, but they may see this and say, you know what? There's so much going on here that's handled so well that this is an interesting movie to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it an A-, by the way. So.
All right, cool. Yeah, for me, here's how I'll describe it. Every movie in the comic book world, you have, Batman has many titles, but the 2 prominent ones are Batman and Detective. Batman is more superheroic in nature, if you will, more action heavy. And Detective, as the title implies, is more driven on Batman solving a mystery, being a detective, being the world's greatest detective, in fact. Of the solo Batman movies, every one of them, up until this point, has been essentially an issue of Batman. This movie is like an issue of Detective Comics.
That's a good. Fair point.
To this level, we've never seen it on film like this.
No. Like I said, and I want to say the movie, and this, again, to speak to non-comic fans, the movie that kept coming into my mind that this was similar enough to, at least in the tone, was The Bone Collector, starring Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie. I thought about that a lot because there were a lot of similarities in the way this was handled, at least in the first 2 acts. So,
right, yeah. So that's how I would explain it to comic fans. They're like, well, what's different about this one? Well, the other ones were all Batman issues, and this, for lack of a better word, is the first Detective Comics issue we've gotten on film. So there's that.
What would you call the 66 series? Batman Adventures? Lego Batman.
Yeah, probably Batman Adventures would be a good one. Yeah. More in league with Super Friends, which came later, but that kind of vibe. But I mean, they had elements of detecting, but again, that was, let me feed this into the computer, and the computer will spit out the answer.
Yes, I remember.
That's not really detecting, right? That's me. That's the equivalent of me going to Google or going to my phone. Hey Google, what is this? And then Google spits it out, right? And so, but yeah. So that's the distinction I make. How I set this movie apart. I think the performances were fantastic across the board. Everybody brought their A game. Paul Dano gives a performance in terms of Batman villainry that is probably second only to Heath Ledger's Joker. And I'm talking about in the context of a Batman film, not the separate Joker film with Joaquin Phoenix. This is in context of just Batman films. Zoe Kravitz, yes, visually she's setting the multiverse wives list in shambles, but her performance was fantastic.
Lot of good emotion from her. Very authentic emotion.
Matt Reeves says he's got many HBO Max series spin-offs in the works. Listen, Warner Brothers, if you don't want me to boycott your studio, Catwoman better be one of them. With Zoe Kravitz, let's go. Make it happen. So that's how good she was.
Launch the Zoe verse.
Oh yeah, the Kravitz verse. And you can even have Lenny do some soundtrack stuff.
Point.
It's a win-win for everybody. Again, I can't say enough about Colin Farrell as Penguin. And I love how, yes, his screen time was limited, but interwoven throughout the whole film. Beautiful, beautifully done. Nobody overstayed their welcome, Donnie. And I never want. Maybe it's my Batman bias, could very well be, but I never looked at my watch once, saying, "Oh my God, this movie's still going." Like, it gave such a complex, detailed detective story and mystery time to breathe, and so the runtime I thought was justified. Now, in terms of the big question that I posed earlier,
personally, that's one of my criticisms. I thought it was just a little too long. Not a lot, just a little.
Fair enough. But to answer the big question, I said all it has to do for me to enjoy it is be a good Batman movie, which has succeeded. The other question was to be in the upper echelon of Batman movies, to be considered great, in my opinion. Could it make me feel like I did when I was 6 again, when I left the theater? The answer to that is yes, it did. And what sealed the deal for me was those moments I talked about, with Batman carrying the girl out and making sure the kid got out first. Those real heroic Batman as a hero moments. Those really sealed the deal for me. I haven't been to a movie in 2 years. The last one I went to was Birds of Prey.
That's the last one I saw in the theater. Yep.
This was worth the wait. And it gave me an experience like I love the fact that my mom and I have that tradition of being able to go to these superhero movies.
That's extremely cool, by the way.
We either have breakfast or lunch beforehand, depending on the scenario, and then we go to the movie. And this movie allowed me to have that back, and I'm incredibly thrilled about that. So yes, it did accomplish my sky high, pie in the sky kind of wish list for this movie. It absolutely did that. So for me, like, I haven't ranked the Batman movies yet. I need a second viewing to do that. So get back to me in about 45 to 50 days from now, when it streams, and I'll let you know after I watch it again. But so I don't know where it ranks, but it's an A+ for me. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
I'm glad. And for me, it was extra special having my child in the seat next to me and us watching this in a drive-in. It was a special memory. So
right, absolutely. So that's the rating. I couldn't be happier as a Batman fan, and now it's the speculation begins on. Give me the Penguin show. What's going to happen there? What's next for the franchise? But it's wonderful to have my all-time favorite character treated so respectfully on film. I absolutely loved it. But that brings this podcast to an end. We hope you enjoyed listening to it. We hope you enjoyed the movie. Let us know your thoughts on the movie itself in the comments below. And if you want to chat with us about the movie on social media, you can. Donnie, where do they find you?
You can find me on Twitter as the Emerald Enthusiast. Let's talk comics. Let's talk collectibles. Let's talk movies. Let's talk Green Lantern.
Awesome. And if you want to find me on social media, it's at Adam_LeafsFan on Twitter. The Vidcast Network has its own Twitter handle at MMNPDC. We have a Facebook group, which is somewhere in the link below. Click that, and you can't see my finger doing it somewhere, here. But anyway, Click the link. I'll add you, and we can continue the conversation there if you so choose. But until next time, remember that the Batman is forever. From the first mysterious riddle that he and Jim Gordon solved to the last. So long, everybody.
So long, everyone.